Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stop.Sit.Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen.
Hello.
We are here today with a really special guest and a fun guest, and we all probably know her. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Kennedy. This is Ariel Taylor from Carried with Love. I'm so excited to hang out with you guys and talk all things surrogacy.
Oh my gosh. So
Hey,
excited.
can I ask a really quick question?
Of course.
I don't do the whole social media. I do it a little bit, but not a lot. What's Carried with Love? I know that's your name, but what is it? Is it a podcast you do? Is it a site? What is it?
Yeah. So, well, actually, I guess to back up, I suppose Carried with Love started as an Instagram page, and it started during oh my gosh, my third surrogacy.
Okay.
Right. Actually, no, my second surrogacy.
Okay.
Third. Hold on, third. There's been too many to count, obviously.
I
And I started the Instagram page because I was documenting my surrogacy, like kind of on a Facebook group, but that was kind of difficult to navigate. So I switched over to Instagram. The idea originally was that I wanted to be able to share, my story as a surrogate and kind of destigmatize the process for a lot of people. And Instagram seemed like a great way to do that. So that's kind of how Carried with Love was started. That was my Instagram name. Okay. Now, years later, that was in 2018 or 2019 when that started. Now, Carried with Love is my entire company. We just incorporated recently and hired a bunch of new staff. And so Carried with Love is a completely virtual private practice that provides mental health support and surrogacy support and kind of support for everybody going through infertility, miscarriage, loss, embryo transfers, like anything surrogacy related, birth trauma, postpartum depression, everything. I'm a registered social worker and a psychotherapist. And so I kind of started, Carried with Love, the company, as this idea to really just reach this population of people, the infertility community that was often kind of left out. Right. And there was people providing counseling, but not really through this trauma informed lens of infertility and then even further surrogacy. Right. And so that's kind of everything that has become. And now, the Instagram page has almost 100,000 followers, and we have a TikTok account, and we're redoing the whole website. And I have 3 other fertility therapists on staff. And it's really exciting. Honestly, I don't think people realize that this has been all this stuff behind the scenes going on for the last couple months while I was pregnant.
Wow.
But it's nice to see it all kind of come around now.
Gosh, that's so amazing. Because I remember you were going to school for that weren't you while you were pregnant?
Yeah, I was in university for 2 of my surrogate pregnancies.
Oh gosh,
yeah.
Bless your heart. That's a lot.
How many
it was a lot.
surrogate journeys did you do?
Yeah, so this always gets confusing for people. So this is a great chance to really explain this. So I am a 5-time surrogate, but I have given birth 4 times. So my very first surrogacy with my first family, I was matched right away after I joined an agency, and we were matched and everything was great. We transferred their one and only tested embryo. We made it to, 13 weeks. Everything was great. And then I miscarried. Their only embryo, their only tested embryo on my very first ever surrogacy experience. So talk about a low blow.
Yep.
So that was my yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think I understood actually the depths that would have impacted my intended parents, especially my intended mom. Now that I'm a therapist that specializes in this, I see it from a very different perspective. But it was really, really sad. Right. And so that was really my first surrogacy. And then I went on to do 4 more pregnancies. And of course, that is the 4 little boys that I've given birth to as a surrogate.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize they were all boys.
All boys.
Because you have a daughter, right? So those were the only boys that you carried, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a daughter, and then the baby that I miscarried was a little girl, and then everybody else was boys. Yeah.
Are any of them sibling journeys of the 4 that were live? Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll say my second and my 4th are brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So that was really special.
Yeah. That's
so
very cool.
That's
okay. So now I think I'm caught up a little bit. I just have to, figure out what I'm doing. All right. Cool.
All right. So, oh my gosh, there's so many places to start, but we can start with, so how did you even get into what drew you to surrogacy?
Yeah. Okay. So this is probably the question I get asked the very most, why in the world would you do this? Right. I think when I started out, which by the way was, oh my gosh, 8 years ago now or so.
Oh, wow.
back in 2016. And really my exposure to surrogacy was really limited. I had a high school teacher that talked briefly about some people use surrogates or donors very briefly.
Okay.
I had some exposure obviously from movies or something, but I knew very little about surrogacy in general. But nevertheless, I felt like, oh my gosh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like in general, I'm the type of person that comes across something and is like, that's what I'm going to do with my life now. And then I just do it, which has worked out well for me so far.
Yeah.
So, surrogacy was something that I was intrigued by. I enjoyed my daughter's pregnancy. I had a good experience. I was not having more children. She was kind of my one and done. And so surrogacy kind of seemed like a really good option for me. So the process really was I Googled it. I probably clicked on the first sponsored ad and signed up with an agency.
Yeah. Most people
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. In hindsight, I mean, knowing everything I know now, I would have taken more time to research. I think I would have taken more time to understand a little bit more what I was getting myself into. I would have just kind of prepared a little bit differently. I mean, I was one of those people that didn't realize that IVF didn't work, right? Like lots of people.
Yeah.
Which was devastating when I miscarried after my first embryo transfer, right? Not even having a concept that was even possible.
Well, and you're in the, you're 13 weeks. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, why would that happen type mentality?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, that experience was like really why I actually went back to school and why I went and got my social work degree and, went on to do the work that I do now, because I didn't have a lot of great support after that loss. And, even the hospital, I will say I've given birth at the same hospital every single time, and they have made massive progress when it comes to their care of surrogates. But at the time, I had a nurse be like, why are you even sad? It's not even your baby.
What?
I see both of your mouths just like drop open, and I know none of your listeners can see this, but
really insensitive.
It's super insensitive. How do you say that to somebody? Like,
and we're talking we're in the 2000s, right? We're in that. Okay.
Yeah, it was hard, right? But I think it really speaks to the idea in general. And I think that a lot of people still have about surrogacy, that it's hush hush, it's private, it's, exploitive, it's not well thought out or planned, right? Like, I think there's just these ideas floating around about surrogacy. And yeah, it was just really tough. I had a really tough time with that miscarriage. Didn't really have a lot of support. Obviously, I, came out okay on top. And I mean, I had some peer support, but an actual counselor that understood not a chance, right? No one knew the concept of miscarriage when it wasn't your baby and the complex feelings that come up. I now support surrogates who do that, right? So, I mean, it's a whole different world now.
Golly, that's crazy.
So did your agency didn't provide you any support when that happened?
So, I had an agency, and I mean, agencies, I will preface this by saying agencies operate differently in Canada than they do in the US. I think that can sometimes be a surprise for people, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but agencies operate pretty differently. They're a unique kind of service in Canada as opposed to the US. So while I did have a support person, I didn't have a therapist, right? Like I had a support person who probably was around the same age as me, that may or may not like has some exposure to surrogacy, but not a therapist. And again, peer support, wonderful. That can be like very, very nice. I had friends, I had other surrogates who were friends that went through the process. Obviously the peer support was great, I had that. But as far as like a trained licensed therapist, I couldn't find one. Like, it was really difficult at the time to find someone who understood this lens of surrogacy as it pertains to loss.
Right. And you have to be able to go through that portion of it to be able to heal. You can heal from the inside, the miscarriage and all of that, but right up in here inside, you gotta be able to talk to somebody who understands it. And if there's nobody there to do that, wow.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And therapy, like, with someone licensed, is confidential. It's safe. It's somewhere where you can be vulnerable. And sometimes you can't always do that with peer support or, your Facebook fertility clinic or Facebook or even your agency sometimes. Right. So, yeah.
You have been in Canada the entire time, right? You've done all Canadian surrogacies. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, since we're talking about the agencies of Canada, we'll quickly do this one because this is like a big misunderstanding in the US. Yep. You guys are not compensated.
Right.
So this is like a fun little discussion about this. And I think this really speaks to these misconceptions that people have about surrogacy in Canada. Right. So in short, no, surrogates in Canada, we cannot be compensated. We can only be reimbursed our pregnancy expenses up to a cap.
To a cap.
Yes. So that cap is really dependent on a lot of factors, right? Now, when we talk about reimbursement, that basically just means you have to have a receipt to prove that you did pay this amount, right?
Yes.
What is considered a pregnancy expense is pretty loose, right? You can pretty much argue that a lot of things are a pregnancy expense. And that's pretty much the way that the law is designed here, is that as long as you have a receipt and could reasonably argue that this was pregnancy related, it can be reimbursed to the surrogate. Typical reimbursements for surrogates in Canada, I would say are like between 30 and 35,000. So it's on the low end of like a comped surrogate in the US. However, I have seen those numbers in Canada even get up to 40, 45. So sometimes if people have a higher wage, or, you know, they have 4 kids at home and childcare would be really expensive, maybe they have a higher cap. But the caveat to that is you have to have a receipt to be reimbursed. Now, like, I think here's something to maybe understand a little bit about Canadian surrogacy. So in Canada, we talk about this word altruistic. That's something you're going to hear all the time, right? Okay. Canada is altruistic surrogacy. They only allow altruistic surrogacy compared to the States, which is compensated surrogacy. We almost use those as opposites, right?
Okay.
But this is kind of funny, right? Because we associate the word altruistic to mean free. That's kind of the way that it's perceived in surrogacy.
Okay.
Making it the opposite of compensated surrogacy, right?
Yes.
It's interesting though, because altruistic doesn't mean free. Altruistic by definition means doing something selfless, you know, doing something for the concern like of others, right? Well, I've never met a surrogate, compensated or not compensated, that didn't feel that way about what they were doing.
Right. No, agreed.
So these are not opposite things. Altruism is not the opposite of compensated, you know, and I think what's an even bigger issue about this altruistic idea in Canada is that while the surrogate herself must operate altruistically, quote, quote, altruistically, the industry is not altruistic. The surrogacy industry is very much commercialized. This is a billion-dollar industry. The doctors, the fertility clinics, the lawyers, the agency, the consulting services. I'm a therapist. I can profit from this industry as a fertility therapist, right? You know, and the only person who cannot be paid is the surrogate.
Oh, wow. That is really backwards.
Yeah. Well, there's more if you want some more. So, you know, like, so then when we talk about in the US, you can be compensated and fairly, like I am pro compensated surrogacy. Absolutely. Right. What's really interesting is when we talk about compensation, that word compensation technically is different than someone being paid. Compensation is to give something, but usually money, in recognition of 3 things: a loss, suffering, or injury. That kind of sounds like pregnancy to me.
Yes, it does. Ariel, I'm loving all these facts that you're spitting out. Okay.
But think about it. Think surrogates go through, like I myself, I have gone through 3 C-sections as a surrogate. I have gone through 8 embryo transfers. I have gone through a miscarriage, a D&C, a chemical pregnancy, 2 failed transfers, and 4 births.
Wow.
I can't be compensated because I'm not allowed to be recognized for the loss, suffering, and injury that all of that encompasses. But you want to know what that sounds like?
But it is loss, suffering, and injury. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so the fact that we can't be compensated, that sounds a lot like another word that we hear a lot, which is exploitation. And exploitation is when you treat someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. So in this entire Canadian landscape where we are trying to make surrogacy not exploitive, which agreeable, of course, we do not want people to be exploited as surrogates, right? But this idea of altruism being the paramount of surrogacy, like this feels a little icky when this is just another systemic example of how women are expected to be endlessly selfless, right? Without being fairly compensated for the unpaid labor that is pregnancy and childbirth.
That's exploitation. Sorry. That's that.
Like it's wild when we think of it in these terms, right?
So has the Canadian government kind of slapped their seal on anything? Is this where this is all coming from? This altruistic versus compensation versus exploited? Are they the ones? And what comes to mind is New York, because they now have a surrogacy, Bill of Rights for the surrogate.
Yes.
Right.
So what does the government, I'm lost. What are they doing?
So in Canada, surrogacy is governed under Health Canada. We're governed by the Assisted Human Reproduction Act. Okay. So this act was designed, it was actually put in place in response to the first surrogate baby being born. And they were like, holy shit, we have no legislation. This is a disaster. Right. So, they got together, they went through the process, and like anything, right? This is a very long process. It took years. Like the first baby was born, I think, in the early 80s, and we didn't get formal legislation until 2004. So this took a very, very long time. In this legislation, the bulk of this legislation is basically about the ethical issues surrounding eggs, sperm, and embryos. Right. So we're talking about things that are prohibited by the Assisted Human Reproduction Act are things like human cloning and not putting a human embryo in a non-human life form or vice versa, or growing an embryo for more than 14 days outside of a human female body. Right. Like these are the type of things that it prohibits. This makes perfect sense. Obviously, we want these type of laws. This protects all of this. This is why it's all under Health Canada. But when we talk about eggs, sperm, and surrogates, that includes the legislation about surrogacy. And so there are these regulations legally for surrogacy. Now, legally, I mean, there is legislation around reimbursements. And what the law basically says is that you cannot pay somebody to be your surrogate. So you as a parent, because this really does kind of fall on the parents to kind of make sure they have the documentation to prove that they are not paying a surrogate. Now, with this being said, surrogacy is very much legal. It's very easy to do. I did most of my journeys independently. So this is not difficult, but it does take a little bit of understanding to figure out how these laws work, right? So what the law prohibits is, in regards to surrogacy, is paying a surrogate. Using a surrogate under the age of 21 is the only actual legal requirement to be a surrogate, is you have to legally be over a certain age. And you cannot pay a third party to match you. So this is the difference in Canada and the US. Agencies are not legally allowed to be paid to match.
Then how does a surrogate get matched? Through an agency? I'm sorry, no, I'm going off. But
well, this is really interesting, right? And this is why surrogacy in Canada can feel a little bit confusing, because it can feel contradictory, even though it's technically not. Agencies in Canada, even though we use this word agency, it doesn't mean the same, right? Discourse matters, as we know, right? The words we use matter. So in the States, when we see the word agency, we think of a few things. We think, okay, you're paying someone to match you, to facilitate, to screen this person, to make sure that, to do all of these things. Agencies in Canada don't operate that way. Agencies in Canada operate more as a consultancy. And so while agencies do bring surrogates into their program, and they have a database of surrogates, and they are essentially facilitating matching, intended parents are not paying for that service.
They're not. Are they paying for something else?
Yes, because agency fees are really expensive.
Okay, so it's kind of built into the agency fee, quote unquote, the matching fee, but really we're not paying for the matching. We're just paying our agency fee. Like, that's how I'm going to view it, or that's how I think it's going.
It's similar to that. Yes,
that's a lot of work, matching. It's a lot of process. Yeah.
It can be. Yeah. So, I mean, while they're, they're providing that, but what you're paying for with an agency is, support, resources, access to referrals, all of that kind of stuff. It used to be that a lot of agencies actually did the receipt management as well. Like they would make sure that the receipts are coming in. Most agencies are not doing that anymore because it's a really big conflict of interest to be having, all that money coming in to your company and not kept separately. We actually had 2 agencies very recently go bankrupt and all of the parents left without their money back.
Oh no.
Another agency also have some issues with letting a ton of intended parents go because they wouldn't sign a non-disclosure agreement about saying negative things about an agency. This is an unregulated industry, right? In regard, agencies are not regulated. And to be clear, I'm not anti-agency. I think they can have a really good place, but you need to find a good agency. And that the most difficult part in Canada is not just going with anybody. It's making sure that you're going with an agency that's going to support you. And more, I think people in Canada really, can match independently very, very easily. The laws in Canada are actually designed to be done independently. It makes the process very, very easy. Legally speaking, the process is very easy to have a surrogate. Intended parents are recognized as the parents right away on the birth certificate, with the exception of Quebec. But where I live in Ontario and, they are recognized on the birth certificate. It's a very easy process to obtain like the birth certificate and stuff. Like it does make a lot of sense to do surrogacy in Canada. It just leaves a little bit like you need to have a little bit of understanding of that, right? And that's where most people struggle, because if you research surrogacy in Canada, you're going to get so many different opinions and ideas. And honestly, a lot of it is not correct. A lot of the information out there about Canadian surrogacy is not correct.
Well, you're squashing some of the things I've heard already.
No, because I'm not even gonna lie to you right now, Ariel. So our understanding was that you guys could get like gift cards. And that's how you got compensated. Don't ask me how. That was like the thing somebody had said along the way. And we're like, wait, you just get gift cards. That doesn't make any sense as a surrogate. Like, I don't know.
No, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, to be clear, like, I mean, I'm sure people are doing all kinds of stuff, right? Like I am sure that is happening. What I tell intended parents, and so like part of what I'm doing is developing this educational course for prospective intended parents so that they can learn all of the actual research around surrogacy. So they know how to navigate the laws, how to find a surrogate, how to vet a surrogate, how to vet an agency, how to be able to do everything on their own independently and have a successful surrogacy journey. So while I've developed this course, obviously I've been doing, a lot of research, and just there's so much misinformation. There's so much going wrong. And that's one of them, right? Because I think in the US especially, there's this misconception that surrogates are really sketchy in Canada and we're doing everything under the table because it's altruistic. So we're saying that we're better than everybody else. First of all, I don't think this. I think I've seen this on Facebook groups, right? Where Canadian surrogates think they're better than everybody else because they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart because they can't be paid. And I think that's a load of crap, because like we're all doing this for the quote unquote right reason.
Right.
And whether or not you're being fairly compensated shouldn't depend on that. And I don't think we need to pretend that we're also not getting money in Canada, because you are. I was reimbursed $35,000. I'll be perfectly transparent on my surrogacy. Now I had a C-section and this was my, 6th pregnancy, right? It was up there, and like with jobs and lost wages, so that that was more, but you have to have a receipt for everything, right? So
because you're not going to have, because here in the US for a C-section you get anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 because you're having to go through that extra recovery, but you don't have a receipt to say, hey, I had a C-section, so I'm going to need more stability or help around.
Do you have a receipt for a housekeeper? Do you have a receipt for maid meals? Like, is that how you're getting it compensated? Childcare.
Okay. Yeah. So that like you'd have a receipt for that. So actually, just to go back to what you just said about C-sections. So this is kind of interesting because in Canada, like, so technically in your contract, there is an amount for a C-section. It's usually $2,000, but this is not something that you are paid out. What this means is that you can add an additional $2,000 to your max reimbursement amount, so that if you have extra expenses like home care, child care, wound care, whatever, then that can be covered by that additional $2,000, but it's not a payout amount. And I would like to say too, that even if a surrogate has an amount where if she loses her uterus or she loses tubes, there's an amount that is not a paid amount. This is not something you can be paid. You are reimbursed, and that is an expense you can add to your cap.
Got it. Okay. That clears up so much for me. Like so much for me. Okay.
Well, and I think too, like when we talk about reimbursement, there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think Canadian intended parents can feel really, well, and probably all intended parents who are pursuing surrogacy in Canada can feel afraid that they're going to get caught doing something wrong. They're going to, you know, they can feel afraid because the laws can be intimidating. Now, I don't think they're intimidating. You just need to be, you know, shown how to do it. But like, I think a lot of people are intimidated because, you know, part of the law says that if you get charged, you go to jail for 10 years and all this stuff. No intended parent or surrogate has ever been charged under this act. And it's very unlikely that that would actually even happen. And, you know, really what I tell intended parents when I'm explaining this is that the reality is, I mean, you can reimburse your surrogate for pretty much anything as long as you can reasonably justify that that's a pregnancy expense. And we had some new guidelines come out in 2020 that kind of gave some more clarity to this, and it listed common expenses, right? So things like pet care, house cleaning, childcare, mileage, meals, extra groceries, chiro, acupuncture, like all of those, right? All of that can be included. But there's this catch-all kind of phrase in there that any other expenses that can be deemed reasonable that both parties agree on, like, can be reimbursed. And really, like, the way that you are reasonable, because of course that word is subjective, right? What's reasonable to one person might not be for another. But really the way that you discern what is reasonable is you would think, okay, if I was to give my surrogate this, and let's use something really unreasonable, like a car. If you buy your surrogate a car and you say, I'm going to gift you this, thank you so much for having my baby, right? That is something that could very easily be seen as financial coercion because it's a car, right? That is absurd.
Right, but if you use that as, say, she doesn't have any way of getting to doctor's appointments, she doesn't have any way of going after the C-section of getting her, you know, post and prenatal care and all of that, is that justifiable then?
So I would say no. So I would say in any circumstance, if you buy your surrogate a car, it's like big no-no, right? But the caveat to that is that if your surrogate does not have reliable transportation and could not reliably get to her appointments, is she qualified to be a surrogate? And if she doesn't have transportation, doesn't drive, perhaps fine, but can she get on a train? Right? Like, you know, I live near Toronto. I'm about 2 hours from Toronto. So a lot of surrogates will take like our subway system or our GO train and kind of, or the Via Rail system, right, to do that. So that's fine, right? But so I think that raises all these additional questions, right? So if you have to spend $30,000 on a car to justify that your surrogate can do this, maybe she's not a great candidate. But if we look at that compared to something else, so like something, let's say you buy your surrogate a I don't know, a gift certificate for a facial and a massage, and it's like $300. Okay. Some people might say, oh, well, that's not a pregnancy expense. You're giving that, you know, that could be coercion. But what you have to look at is, would that $300 gift certificate to a spa or a massage for someone who's pregnant, would that alone, would that alone make them want to become a surrogate? Would they become a surrogate only if they could get that $300 gift card to a spa? No, but they might do it for a car.
Yes, you're right.
So that's the difference. The difference is, if this alone was something you were giving to someone, would this alone coerce somebody or influence someone to become a surrogate? And that's how I tell intended parents, you reason what is reasonable. Right?
Okay. Yes.
That's a good scale to go off of.
Question then, since we're talking about, you know, reasonable things that you can get reimbursed for, you said save the receipts. Now, in the US, there's something called seed trust. I don't know if you have something like that up there where it goes to that third party. How does it work? The parents put the money in and then the surrogate submits or the intended parents aren't writing checks to the surrogate every 5 days, are they? Like,
no. So the way that reimbursements typically work, now mind you, there's variation to this, but typically the way it works is that cap amount is reimbursable in monthly equal installments. So the way that I've seen it in most contracts, let's use the number 30,000 because that's nice and round. Let's say a surrogate's max reimbursement for the entire pregnancy is $30,000. Well, that's $3,000 a month for 10 months. So the way that it works is she saves up, and typically that starts after pregnancy confirmation. So usually it's after a second confirmed beta, or sometimes after first or even second heartbeat confirmation. It really depends on the wording.
Okay.
Because there really isn't a standard, like you can really put in lots of different things in your contract as long as everybody agrees and you're working within the law, right? So, I mean, there's like, let's say there's $30,000, 10 equal installments of $3,000. A surrogate would keep all her receipts for that month. She would organize them all. There's really good apps that you can use for this. There's one called Smart Receipt. You upload all your receipts to it. It takes pictures, and you can generate a PDF report. So what I found easy is I'd keep all my receipts. I would take pictures of them. It categorizes it automatically in this app, and then you can generate a PDF each month. And I would email that PDF to Marissa, my intended mom. And so I would email her and be like, hey, here's all my receipts. Here's the total amount. And she would reimburse me directly. Now, I know that this sounds sketchy and everybody in the US is probably like, oh my God, this is crazy. We don't have a lot of escrow companies in Canada. This is not like, because historically, a lot of that was handled by agencies. But a lot of agencies are moving away from the receipt management and instead having intended parents do it directly. Because again, the laws are kind of designed to be able to do this independently. Now, there is some trust there, obviously, making sure that you're matching with somebody. Again, this I think speaks to the difference in matching in Canada, is that there isn't a lot of just like matching without knowing who you're matching with. Like you are purposely matching and getting to know somebody. Whereas in the States, it can be more common to really match like completely out of the blue and know nothing before you start the process.
Radio.
Right?
Very
yes. Whereas here, I mean, yes, you are meeting for the purpose of matching, but I think I caution intended parents who are matching like organically or matching independently to, spend time getting to know this person. Is this somebody that you want to do this with? And I think surrogacy is a big deal. This is not about just giving people babies, right? This is about giving somebody lives. And it's a person, right? This is someone who is growing to grow up and be a person. And so I think we need to be cognizant of how we are speaking and interacting about the ways that all these people are born and doing it in a way that's appropriate, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
With some heavy stuff. Yeah.
This is fantastic. But this is a great segue into how did you match with Marissa?
Instagram. We met on Instagram.
Is she in Canada as well, or just you? Okay.
Yeah, we're both in Canada. So I met Marissa. Oh my God, I don't even know how long ago now. Over a year before we actually even transferred or anything. Oh, wow. And we met because at the time I had given birth to my previous surrogate baby.
Okay.
Who's now like 2.5, which is wild. And so I had finished up that surrogacy. I knew I wanted to do it again, but I was, just casually looking for intended parents. It was really important for me to wait the full 18 months before getting pregnant again because I had a C-section. That's also something I tell people. I'm a stickler for making sure that Canadians can still follow good guidelines because we don't have the same ones in Canada.
Wait, hold on a second.
Where's conversation?
Ariel, where's the 18 months coming from for a C-section? Is that something written in your Canada law in your...
No, so that's not like Canadian law. That's not, that's really more just like, and even just like journals of gynecology say typically 12 to 18 months post-birth is safest, 12 for vaginal, 18 for C-section. Many clinics kind of follow those guidelines, although not all. It was important for me to kind of be right at that 18 months.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I was kind of getting close to that. And I met Marissa because she's kind of slid into my DMs and we started chatting and we were talking because at the time she was matched with a previous surrogate. She had a surrogate before me and it didn't end up working out, but she was matched with another surrogate before me. And so we got chatting because she was kind of like, oh, I have this surrogate and you were a previous surrogate. So we just kind of got talking. She had questions and stuff. Okay. And then we kind of bonded over our love of The Office, and we just realized we had so much in common. We lived, we live about just under 2 hours from each other.
Nice.
And so it just like, we really became really good friends really quickly. It was really nice. It's so funny because it's like you meet people and you feel like you've known them for so much longer than you've actually known them because you go through so much together, right?
Yes.
But yeah, she literally just like slid into my DMs, and I had done this before, and I was like, yeah. And so when things fell through with her surrogate, it was like, you know what, like let's do this, and we kind of like built this relationship already. And I think that's the way that a lot of people independently match, is they kind of just let this relationship develop a little bit. And I think when you do that, you're less likely to have, a less than satisfactory experience, right? Yeah. You're more likely to have a positive surrogacy experience if you put the effort into it beforehand to make sure that you're doing this with somebody that wants to do it with you too, right?
Yeah. Kennedy can speak probably better to it than I can, but what I've been seeing and what I've been hearing is in the US, surrogates are not, because I did this decades ago, but surrogates are not given the opportunity to cultivate and nurture that relationship until all the clearances, all the check marks, everybody's doing everything, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then, okay, boom, everybody's got the green light. Now y'all can talk. But you've already been through contracts and psych evals and medical screenings, and it's been months, but you're not allowed to talk. So it's odd to me. Your way, this not your way per se, but this,
we'll call it that. I'm actually fine with that. Let's call this my way.
Cultivating that relationship. It's, you guys are intended parents and surrogates are going to go through so much, whether they're going to be ups and downs. You're going to have a lot of good, but you're going to have some heartache too.
Oh yeah.
And you have to cultivate it. So I like that aspect of Canadian surrogacy. I really like that.
Yeah. And it's not to say that everybody who does surrogacy in Canada maybe has that kind of idea, and not to say that everybody in the US also does it, but much more hands off. But I think like this just creates a different type of experience that can be really positive for everybody. And that's kind of the whole point. And really, like, I'll be honest, like, I don't love the way surrogacy operates in Canada as a whole. Like, I think there's a lot of issues with it. And I think we can do things a little bit differently to make sure that we're servicing this fertility community properly. And, maybe I'm a little biased because like as a therapist, and I work primarily with women who are going through infertility, but then who may also continue on to surrogacy. And now they're becoming this mom through surrogacy. And I don't know if there's enough support for the moms going through this.
Yeah.
And dads, of course, too. But, like working with infertility patients, there's not enough support. And, I noticed that a lot when I got my degree. I opened my private practice and I had a wait list within 2 weeks. Wow. Do you know how rare it is for a private practice therapist to have a full caseload and a wait list in 2 weeks? Like people wait 10 years for that.
Gosh.
It was insane, right? So then you're like, oh my God, why is this missing?
Why?
Because it's just, I hate to say things are swept under the rug, but things are kept private and quiet. That's why.
Yeah.
I mean,
no one wants to have the public hard conversations. Like, no one wants to talk about the scary times, the sad times, the what if things. Like everybody wants life to be butterflies and rainbows, and like going into a surrogacy, a lot of the time, especially if you're a first surrogate, like you're so naive. You're like, everything is perfect, beautiful, great things happen, nothing negative happens. Until you experience it, or one of your friends experience it, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this hits home, and then everything crumbles, and it's like, wait, now who do I talk to? Like now I don't know where to go.
And by the time an intended mom gets to this process, she's probably been through so much heartache, and this is probably the last option.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's the last option. And to get to that on a journey of wanting to become parents or a mom or intended dads, what have you, that's a hard one right there to swallow. This is our last option. Like, I don't, there's more of you type of therapists. Yeah. Like you just said, you have some in your.
Yeah. Yeah. So like Carrie would love, I mean, like, I was like this, I can't handle all this on my own. And like, clearly this is like a need. And I mean, there are other reproductive counselors and therapists and stuff like that, but like, clearly there is a huge need for this and just this specialized service. And so, yeah, I have 3 other therapists on staff ranging in, specialties, all fertility focused, but, some more around parenting and postpartum depression and some around, the actual process of surrogacy and others for miscarriage and loss and, difficult birth. And the thing is like, I think what happens is maybe I'm a little bit jaded because in my work, I see everything when it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And so I have seen surrogacy in this different lens and maybe been exposed to the things about this industry that are not great sometimes, but that I think can be easily improved on by establishing relationships before a surrogacy starts, making sure that surrogates are properly screened. That's another issue that I've seen in Canada. I don't think a lot of surrogates are properly screened to be surrogates. So then we have surrogates who shouldn't be, that have challenges that could have been mitigated if we screened properly at the beginning. Now, I think this is rare. I think we're getting better at this, but it happens, right? Just like it can happen that intended parents aren't ready and something happens, right? So when surrogacy journeys go wrong, I often step in at that point from a therapy standpoint to help pick up pieces, right? So I think it's just exposed these cracks in the industry that I think we can do a lot better at. And that's one of the reasons that I started this whole online course for intended parents, because it's like, man, if intended parents knew the qualifications of a surrogate from the actual research that we have in Canada and the guidelines that we have in Canada through the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, which is kind of similar to the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, but we're way behind. That's a whole nother thing. But, following those guidelines, making sure that, there's a standard, because every clinic's different, every doctor is different. I mean, we might have these guidelines, but that's not to say that a doctor couldn't still approve people. There are surgeons all the time they get approved that I don't think have any business being approved, but I'm not a doctor. So I think having more standardized guidelines could be really helpful, and just making sure that we're setting people up for success, because, having a surrogate, like I'll use my own experience, having a surrogate join an agency, sign up, and within a week have a match. And within just a little bit past that, going to embryo transfer. By the way, I was only 6 months postpartum of a C-section with my daughter when I was signed up with this agency. Wow. So these are the things, right? I had no idea. I was so naive. And so, and everything, for all intents and purposes, like turned out okay, right? I mean, here I am, I'm a successful surrogate, but I would have made choices differently if I had been more informed. And I think it could have shaped my experience differently had I had that upfront knowledge first. And that's what's missing in Canada. The focus is, let's intake surrogates, let's match them as quick as possible. Like, let's keep this going, which is great. I'm all for like, let's get babies for people, right? That want them. But at the same time, I think we're doing a disservice to surrogates if we are pushing people through this funnel so quickly that they're not having time to process what's happening, or they're not ready. And then they're so far into it that now they feel guilty stepping out on these intended parents, right? Because they were pushed through. I think there's a better way to do surrogacy.
Agreed. And just from what you're saying, I agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Wow. So in your personal opinion, do you think that Canada will ever be open to change its guidelines? Like the government would want to hear from you guys and be like, yeah, like we can make changes.
It's hard to say. Like, there's been a lot of like lobbying efforts in Ottawa. Like, I've even been a part of them, and advocacy groups, and there was stuff brought to Parliament. There was stuff brought forward, but the problem is that was also right before COVID, and then COVID happened, and the problem is you need somebody to bring it to Parliament, right? Like, you need somebody to do this, and I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to touch it because it's a big monster. Like, we're not just talking surrogacy reimbursements, and that we're talking all the other ethics in the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, as far as like bioethics, right? Which is a completely separate, it should really be separate legislation. I think what would be really helpful in Canada is that we can get comprehensive guidelines from a governing body. So our governing body in Canada is the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society. And then that would be comparable to the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. The American Society of Reproductive Medicine has guidelines for third-party reproduction, right? They have a full PDF on their website that give guidelines to this. And in the US, everything defaults to that, right? That really is kind of like, that's the standard, right? Yes. And then clinics should be following that. They've come out with pretty comprehensive guidelines that I think are very fair. You know, it makes a lot of sense. In Canada, we actually don't have a lot of those guidelines. We don't even have them. So we have the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, and their guidelines were from 2016, and they've yet to be amended. And they're on the website saying, you know, waiting to be updated, will be updated, 2016. Ooh.
Wow.
So, and we've had major legislation changes in 2020. Yeah. And now we're we're coming up to 2024.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yoy.
So, you know, the guidelines that we do have for the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society are more basic. So around like more about health, because that organization is run by doctors. It's a lot of like, they do a lot of like research and testing on genetic material and embryos and all that stuff, right? So for surrogacy, you know, they are giving guidelines. They include things like surrogate needs to be, you know, over 21, ideally under 45, should have a BMI of around 30, 32. This is actually a really interesting thing, because one of the major differences is everybody assumes that in Canada, the BMI limit is like, you can be whatever BMI and you will be approved. That is partially true, actually, here. So because doctors can approve at any BMI. I've seen doctors approve very, very high BMIs. Yeah. Now it does come down to the doctor, but I will say that the guidelines at the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, their guidelines specify that anyone with a BMI over 35 should be discouraged from treatment. Yet we are still seeing this insane degree of what is approved. Now, this is just an example because, you know, I'm the first one to say I know the BMI chart is not the gold standard of health for women, of course, right? Of course, but this is what I'm talking about. We have this guideline that says 35, not so good. And then we have fertility doctors approving people at a BMI of 45 or 50. So this is a problem. Now, I'm not saying this is every clinic. This is not every doctor. This is a one-off kind of thing that this happens.
Right.
But if we had guidelines that could be, and you know what, let's develop them by doctors. If a doctor thinks that, you know what, we can very healthily transfer to a surrogate with a BMI of 40, great. Let's do some research. Let's get a guideline that backs this, right? Same when we talk about number of previous pregnancies and previous C-sections, right? We don't have those guidelines that say that. It's the American Society of Reproductive Medicine that says no more than 5 previous births or 3 previous C-sections. We don't have that rule in Canada. I know people that have had 6, 7, 8 C-sections. Wow. I know surrogates who have given birth 8, 9 times. I don't think that's safe, right? I don't think it's safe. I think we need better guidelines, and let's develop them by doctors. Let's do research. Let's figure out what the gold standard is, and then let's be that. Yeah. Right. I don't want to be known as the country that has these really lax results. Surrogacy already has like a very, I don't want to say a bad reputation, but it has a reputation. It does. Right. And maybe we can be an example and the gold standard and have guidelines that keep women safe and don't exploit women, but they also fairly compensate them for their time. And at the same time, we're all accomplishing the same goal of helping these people have their baby.
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Because being a surrogate, you have to have been a mom. That you've had in Canada, same thing, right? You've had to have a
oh my gosh, Ariel.
Stop it, Ariel.
You could not have ever had a baby?
Here's another issue that I have with the guidelines is that in general, no, it is not recommended. I advise everybody that you should not use a surrogate who has not had a baby. This is very standard. This should not even be up for discussion. The only time that I have seen exceptions for this is for like a sister or a close family member. That makes sense, right? Okay. But in general, if you're matching with a stranger, I say quote unquote stranger, because you know it's someone that you met for the purpose of surrogacy, you should not be matching with someone who has not had a child. With that being said, there are agencies that advertise that they will bring in surrogates who do not have children, and there are doctors that will approve them.
No.
Because it happens, right?
And statistics on that. I don't understand it because you've never used your uterus. Like you have no idea.
But it opens up a whole box of just not good stuff, because they'll get more attached to that baby. Then you do run the risk of them not wanting to relinquish because they've never had a baby before. Like, hi, okay,
Yeah.
that's not a common practice, right? But it happens.
No. This is not common. This is not standard. This is not even happening. Like, most agencies would not even accept a surrogate who is not a good agency should not accept a surrogate who has not had a child. Right? You know, so that, I mean, that's kind of my stance on that. Yeah. But it does happen, right? And these stories, what happens is then people go in these Facebook groups and they go to these educational type things and they go, oh, well, I had 5 C-sections and I was fine. Or, well, I never had my own baby and I was a surrogate 3 times and I'm great. Right. So, I mean, we have these exceptions, but I don't think that's the rule. And I don't think we should be pushing the boundaries just so that we can match people. Right. Because like, I mean, as a therapist too, because I'm someone who does those psychosocial assessments for surrogates, like those psych evals, like that's something that I do, and that my therapist can do. So, you know, I would not pass a surrogate who has not had a child.
Right.
Okay.
Unless they were caring for like a sister.
Right.
Got it. But like, as a rule, I would not pass somebody who'd never had a child, because I don't think ethically you can like decide to do something and make an informed choice about something when you've not experienced that. Right. I don't think you can sign on like how can you, like, I mean, even as I'm thinking, like, if I'm doing a psych eval for somebody and like they've never had a child, well, how can I like give any sort of pass when they can't even consent to what this is? They don't even know.
Right. They have no idea what they're signing. They have no idea what they're signing up for when it comes to pregnancy. Like, just
and the hormonal shifts and the medications and it's a lot. Now, granted, most people don't have all those medications when they're just getting pregnant in their own world, but they still know the ins and outs of pregnancy and birth and post-birth. You just don't have a baby and boom, you're done. Like,
no. Well, and like, we'll talk about the fact, even aside from all of that, like, you know, even just like the fact that you're going through all those physical body changes, right? And it's not your baby for the first time, right? And, you know, I think when you go through that experience as a mom for the first time, right, you carry your own baby, there's feelings there, like it's different, right? And, you know, I mean, I think when you go through that process, you know more about why somebody else wants to have a baby, right? And I think like your motivation shifts from I'm doing this because I love this for me to I'm doing this because I love this for somebody else, right? And I think it's just so hard to understand, like, and we don't even know if someone could get pregnant if they've never had a baby.
Right. Exactly.
Fertility clinic on the parent's dime, I might add.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
To be like, let's see if you maybe can get pregnant. If I was an infertility patient and I had gone through a whole journey and got to surrogacy, hell no, would I be like, yeah, let's try that.
Yeah, no
way.
And that's just my opinion, but because there are strict guidelines you have to have had for surrogacy in the US. You have to have had at least one natural birth, correct? Or one birth, right? Is that still
one birth, and you have to have custody of the child. Like, you have to show that you're a safe, healthy parent. Correct. Like, and are able
and you're still parenting, right?
No, I agree. I always, when I'm educating intended parents, I'm not only giving them the guidelines that we have that will get someone approved, but I'm giving them the best practices, because you know, I think you're doing a disservice to intended parents as well when you're not giving them all the information, right? If you're presenting them with a surrogate with a very high BMI, for example, and you don't know the risk associated with that, well, how can you make an informed choice, right? Or if you're presented a surrogate who's had multiple C-sections, you know, or way over the limit of births, you might not know that that's not acceptable, or why that might not be acceptable. And we're talking about IVF pregnancies, which have slightly higher risks than spontaneous pregnancies, right? So it's just it's a whole different ballgame. I think we need a lot more regulations and just guidelines. It doesn't even need to be legislative. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't need to be a law. We don't need a law to say this stuff. But we could have guidelines that are research-based, like the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, right? That say we to think that these are the best practices. This is what doctors should be following, right? And then everybody agrees that that's the standard. I don't think it should be about, okay, well, let's stretch the requirements because we can get more surrogates that way. Because the reality is there's not enough surrogates. There's like a 12 to 18 month waiting list with an agency to find a surrogate in Canada right now. Right. So I don't think the answer is let's bend the rules and accept everybody, because in my experience, I've seen that go south a lot more than not.
Right. Which, especially for the intended parents, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because again, this is really their last effort to get a family. That's tough. Wow. You have like demystified and then educated
I know
so many different topics, and we didn't even really talk about your journeys.
Can we touch on your last journey real quick?
Yes.
I know it was so beautiful. It was so wonderful to like watch it, like and
it was so beautiful and it was so wonderful. And it was a really, really, really hard pregnancy. It was a really hard pregnancy. And this is the thing, right? I mean, it was lovely. It was wonderful. I had a hard time. This was my roughest pregnancy that I've ever had. And not that anything went wrong. Everything was great, but pregnancy is hard when it's your 6th time doing it, right?
Right. Sure. Body's like, oh bother, here we go again. So when you say hard, did you have like morning sickness? Was it just more difficult you got more fatigued, more things like that?
So I gained 60 pounds.
You don't look it.
Yeah, you don't look it. You just went on a cruise. You looked phenomenal.
Secret weight gain. So I mean, that was a tough one. I did gain 60 pounds. In all my previous pregnancies, I've gained about 30. And in one pregnancy, I only gained like 13 pounds. So this was way more off base than that. So I mean, that was a little bit difficult. I mean, I'm someone who I think is generally very body positive, but I think anytime that you gain enough weight where you're like, none of my clothes go up past my knees, you start to feel a little weird about it. So, but I think I handled it okay. I know it's temporary. It'll get back, but weight gain was really hard. I didn't really have a lot of morning sickness. Thankfully, that's not something that I usually get. But it's really bad, just brain fog. And, I had skin reactions, I had rashes. It was just a lot of like little things, but nothing really wrong. Right. That's the thing. Like there was no complications. I didn't have any bleeding. Baby was always great, but I was really tired. And by the end, it was really tough. It was hard to kind of document some of that stuff, right? Because it's like this really delicate balance between being really real about, hi, I'm miserable and I don't know if this baby's ever going to come out of my body, because that's what you feel like at 38 and a half weeks pregnant. Right. And, it's the balance between wanting to show that authentically while also understanding that like my entire audience is women who would do anything to be pregnant. And so it was really difficult to kind of navigate, like, how am I supposed to do this without not hurting somebody? Right. Or being like, I don't want to like make people feel bad. And I mean, the reality is, I mean, it does. I know that for the fertility community, I mean, it's hurtful anyways, and that's not my fault. It just is the nature of the beast kind of thing. Right. But, like overall though, like I'm so happy with my surrogacy journey, I guess. And it's just like, I really, despite it being a difficult pregnancy, I really enjoyed the process. I really liked being able to spend so much time with Marissa. And it was really a different experience because with my other intended parents, the couple that I carried their 2 sons for, they are like local-ish, but their second son was carried right through COVID. So we didn't even see each other the entire pregnancy in person. And I had to go to all my appointments by myself. And my one before that, I was matched with 2 dads from California, actually. So they came down, I think 2 or 3 times during the pregnancy, and then of course for the birth. And so, but I mean, not like a day to day. And, so doing this with Marissa, it was just like, it was so fun. Like, it was really nice to be a part of the things that normally I wouldn't get to be a part of. Right. And, I love everything about birth. I think that's part of surrogacy that like really draws me, which is funny because I'm someone who's had 4 C-sections. But I love birth. I love this idea of this human being like half into this world and half not, and it's just like, it's amazing. Like, I think birth is so cool. And so for me, it was always so important to be part of that and be able to watch that. And I think that's part of the reason in my last birth, and I was going for a VBAC. I've had a VBAC, but I was trying to do one again, and it was a real struggle at the end because it wasn't going to happen. And it maybe could have, but circumstances were just a little bit different. And, a big thing for me was that I wanted to be part of the process, and I wanted to watch Marissa become a mom, and I wanted to watch Don become a dad. And, after doing this whole process together for pretty much 2 years, right? From start to finish, from when we kind of started everything, it was just the most monumental moment. And the thought of missing it in a C-section really hurt. And I have to say, I'm so incredibly thankful for like our midwife. Like, we had an incredible midwife. And like, she really advocated for us, because once we kind of switched gears and we were like, okay, this is going to be at the hospital, it's potentially going to be a C-section or some form of an induction, because it just wasn't happening on its own. She really advocated for us, and the other OBs, the other female OBs on staff, like really came together. She had like 2 or 3 of them all kind of collaborating and how to make this C-section good, right?
Yeah, what you wanted.
They let me FaceTime the whole time in the OR. So like, I was in the OR with my partner Brandon, and then they were actually in the NICU room, but we didn't need the NICU room, but like there's a little room beside with like a sliding door about 10 feet from the OR table. And they let both of them in there so that they could watch through the window the whole C-section.
Awesome.
Like, they got to watch him be born, and then we were on FaceTime so that they could hear the first cry. And then when they took him in to see his parents, I was on FaceTime, so I got to watch.
That's cool.
And like, that for me, I think was just so important. And like, on a much broader scale, I think it just really speaks in the way that the hospital and birth community in general can really make a difference in how we treat these type of situations. And 100%. For us, this was lovely. This was, she was treated as the mom. Like, they talked to her as the mom. Like, we were very clear about all this stuff, right? Like, we had our own rooms. So, and we'd go back and forth in between and stuff, and go for little walks together or whatever. And like, it was such just like really great experience. And I also think really good for maybe hospital staff to see such a positive surrogacy story, and having been there before for a really not positive surrogacy experience with my miscarriage, I think it just came really full circle to feel really supported. And I mean, that doesn't happen to everybody. I've heard stories, and I've supported people who did not have a good surrogacy experience at their hospital, that were not valued as the parents, were treated like they were the adopted parents coming in to steal this baby away. So I'm so thankful that our hospital really got it together. And I think this could set a great example for how we can support parents via surrogacy and make this experience really positive for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow, I'm so happy that worked out.
Positive for you, because I personally have never experienced a C-section. So like that didn't even cross my mind, because each time I got to witness and be in that same room with the parents and feel that moment. So to be able to work something out where you can still get that moment as a surrogate, I mean, that's the moment that we all want. That's what we do surrogacy for. That's that moment. Like, that is the end all be all of every feeling.
It's lovely.
That's awesome. I didn't get it any of the 3. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't get it any of the 3.
Really?
I had 2 C-sections. The triplets and the twins were C-sections, and the first one, they had to knock me out because the placenta stuck, and I was starting to bleed out, and I went right into surgery. I didn't get it any time. Now that you just mentioned that, wow, I'm probably going to need to get your services, Ariel, to deal with some of that trauma.
So the unresolved trauma. But like, isn't it so funny, right? That it was like, it wasn't that I didn't want a C-section, because I've had 3. Like, I had my daughter, and then I had a VBAC with my first surrogacy, and then I had C-section. Okay. So like, all really different experiences, but it was really that the important thing for me was just watching that moment and being a part of it, and not feeling like I just got to go to surgery and be out of the loop. Right. So
exactly.
That was really nice, because when I had my VBAC, right. And it's funny because that little boy actually just had his birthday like 2 days ago, and he just turned 6. months. So that's crazy. So my oldest surrogate baby is 6. That's wild. But his birthday was just like 2 days ago. So I was watching and he was my VBAC. So all my memories that came up were his like birth video and our photos. And it just like, it brought back so many memories. And, you know, we have this video of my intended mom holding her son for the first time after years of infertility. And
it makes me goosebumps.
Oh my God, it's just beautiful, right? I could watch it forever, right? And it's just like, it's those moments. And then, you know, when I got to watch that for Marissa, it was just so special. Like it just meant so much to me. And, you know, when people are like, why do you do this? It's like, why wouldn't I do this?
Yeah. Right. Here, look at this video. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like, why wouldn't you do this? I don't know why more people aren't surrogates, but that's right. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions about that. I mean, a lot of people think I can't be a surrogate because my tubes are tied.
No, right? I was a surrogate.
So they don't pursue it. They don't pursue it, and they could. Right. Or they could. They think it, you know, they think like, oh, well, like I can't do that for free. It would cost too much, right? They don't realize that you can get all your expenses covered. Right. And, you know, they don't realize that it's so much more accessible. And, you know, it's not for everybody. I understand that. I mean, I don't think it should be, but I think if it's something that people even remotely think that they could do, it's like, think of the legacy you get to leave behind, and think of the legacy you get to like push forward for other people. Yeah. Right. Like it's beautiful. And like I've been a donor too. So like I've seen my donor babies. Yeah. Did you guys know that?
Know that.
And you know, you have live births. Yeah.
There's 4 live births, and I've met one of them. I'm in contact with another one, and 2 other families that I've donated to. Like we're still in contact, but they just haven't had a baby yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's cool. That's one thing I couldn't do.
I loved it.
Long story short, I was adopted at birth, and there was that hole, and I just couldn't do it. Yeah. Couldn't do it.
Yeah. So, donor conception's wild, right? It's so funny. Like, so I'm like slightly cheeky about it. And so we know these people, like we're friends with them on Facebook and stuff. So it's funny because, you know, there's like a picture of them, and like, it was my egg that was used. Right. And I turned to my partner. I was like, hey, Brandon, like if I had a baby with this guy, this is what our kid would look like. And he's like, okay, it's weird when you say it that way.
Oh my gosh.
All in good fun.
Can I ask? So they're related to your daughter. Like your daughter has like
biological siblings. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's a little bit older, so she can kind of understand that. And like first of all, because this is also a misconception of surrogacy. Would you say that your daughter has been negatively affected by you being a surrogate?
Oh my God, no.
Okay.
Definitely not. And I don't think any surrogates' kids are ever negatively affected. They either like just don't really care, and not in like a bad way, but like I don't know, my 8-year-old has better things to deal with. I think she forgets I'm pregnant half the time, right? Yeah. So or they think it's really cool, and it's just a more inclusive way to learn about families, right? Yes, like
absolutely. Absolutely. I know. I laugh at that whenever people say it, and I'm like,
I know.
I was a surrogate, now I am. So no.
Yeah. And I was only ever a gestational carrier, so I never carried any of the babies that I donated my eggs to. But I've been an egg donor separately. So like as far as fertility treatments, right? Like I've done it all. I've done egg retrievals. I've done all the embryo transfers. I've done all the, you know, the medications and stims and everything. Like, yeah, it's wild.
Can I ask on egg retrieval, is there a cap there as well for the not compensation, but the
reimbursement? Yeah. So like, and this is the thing, it's evolving because things are changing a lot, like cost of living. Well, you know, like 5 years ago, nobody was getting $80,000 in the States to be a surrogate, right? But here we are. Right. So in Canada for like egg donors, so same idea, egg donors cannot be compensated. They can only be reimbursed expenses. It seems to be that what I'm seeing now is about $9,000 that they can be reimbursed. And that covers like all their travel, food, gas, childcare, etc., all that kind of stuff, lost wages, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So, and I mean, maybe I'm just addressing the elephant in the room, but really, you're not really getting this huge windfall, and I hate to say it that way at the end. Like, here's your $20,000 at the end of our in the States of a contract that wasn't paid out to you because this is what we agreed upon, blah, 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 blah. You guys are just getting
reimbursed.
So
You don't have anything extra in your pocket when
right, unless you're finding creative ways to get reimbursed, but you have to have receipts for that. So, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is the hard part, right? Is it's like I think there's a way that surrogacy can be exploited, obviously, right?
Yes,
we see that
course.
in all these different ways, but I think in these more subtle ways, it can be, these are where we see like some more subtle forms of like, I don't know, exploitation potentially, when there is a gray area in what can be reimbursed or who's checking this. And the answer is nobody. Nobody's checking this, right? That there isn't a governing body looking. You're not going to get audited by anybody because you're not putting this anywhere. You're keeping it for yourself, and you're keeping your records for 7 years in case somebody reports you and it gets investigated and there's evidence and you go to trial or something, right?
Wow.
So
there's no one checking, right? But you need to, I mean, we need to follow the laws. We need to do things properly, right? But there are these examples where, I mean, you could say, is that really reasonable? Maybe things are borderline. I also think sometimes if we see a surrogate who's, let's say she's a stay-at-home mom and their family income isn't super high, but their reimbursement amount is more than they make in a year, maybe that's a red flag, right? So these are some things that we just have to be like mindful of when doing this process. And it's about being reasonable, right? And how do we measure that subjective word to make sure that we're doing things properly, or as properly as we can, I think, with the framework.
So then the one thing that I've not struggled with, but that makes very clear sense to me now is U.S. surrogates are literally being compensated. Like you at the end of this journey, you're going to get 60 to 85,000 bucks in your pocket. Like, boom, here you go. And that can change families' lives. That literally can change lives. It can allow a child to go to college. Like there's good things that can come from it.
I completely agree.
Down payments on homes. I just, in my heart, are so sad for the Canadian surrogates because I don't see that bucket. I don't see that where it could change their lives and their children.
and it doesn't and that's the thing, right? Is like surrogates in Canada are, to be perfectly honest, like it doesn't, right? Because, and I mean, yes, you're getting, let's say $30,000, but this is coming over 10 months, $3,000 a month for 10 months, right? Now for some people that might be a lot of money, right? That might be more than they make in a month, right? For some people that's what they might make in a week or 2 weeks, right? Or in a paycheck. So I mean, like this is again subjective about what's life changing, but no surrogates in Canada are paying off their house or cars or putting in a pool, right? And like the idea is that you're not out money. And yes, are there creative ways to stretch it? I mean that's the reality. I mean that there is, people are doing that. But I mean, I think if we're talking about, because anything could really be considered a pregnancy expense, anything that could be reasonably justified, it's not hard to have a lot of the expenses while pregnant of your, I don't want to say living expenses because like your rent obviously doesn't count, or your car payment, but like these day-to-day expenses, a lot of those can be reimbursed, and you can be very comfortable and take extra time off work if you need it and stuff that can be covered. So, I mean, while I think there are advantages, right, to having a lot of expenses covered for almost a year of your life, you're not coming out of this at the end, right? So if we think like, a surrogate in Canada might get $3,000 a month on probably a high end, I would say that's probably on the higher-ish end, 35, but a surrogate in the States might be getting 80. Well, that's like $8,000 a month.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But then we have this whole other issue, is that when we determine market value of something by how available it is, right? What happens, right? Surrogacy is expensive because there's not a lot of surrogates, and this is what happens. Then we really leave a lot of people out that want to have children that are forced out of the surrogacy market because they cannot afford $80,000. And that's just for the surrogate. We're not talking about the $50,000 agency fee or $2,000 to the lawyer or to the clinic or to the psych evals or to the insurance.
Right.
Like that's minimum. You're talking $200,000 in the States to have a baby.
You are.
Whereas
easily.
Or in Canada, I would say realistically, if you already have embryos created, which a lot of people who are going through surrogacy and infertility already do have embryos. Okay. If you already have embryos created, you're looking probably realistically 80 to 120.
Okay, and that's more doable. Reasonable. Like you can
mortgage your house for a second and get that and be able to start a family. Like if
and people do.
Yeah, you do.
You know, and that's accessible, right? So then it's this whole ethical issue of, okay, we compensate surrogates. Well, is there a dollar amount value? I don't know. Because some would say, oh my God, I could never do a pregnancy for $35,000. And other people would be like, man, I'd do this for 10.
Right.
Yeah. And other people would be like, I'm not doing this for $80,000. Right. So like the value of what we put on this is really dependent on the person. And I think that's very acceptable to be able to decide. But then maybe there's, on the other side, how do we prevent intended parents from feeling exploited? Like, you know, it's not my fault I can't carry a baby and I have to pay $100,000 for somebody else to do it and pay everybody else, you know, just to do this. And realistically, that's not attainable for everybody, right? Not even close.
I have seen a lot more parents, like intended parents on Instagram nowadays that are going to Canada. Like they're going to Canada, and it makes perfect sense. If I was an intended parent, if I was in that situation, I'd probably be going to Canada because there's no way I could afford it in the States. There's no way.
Really
and like surrogacy in Canada can be great, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of advantages here, like our healthcare being covered for the surrogate, right? So like, I mean, the IVF is not, well, actually in Ontario, IVF can be covered by insurance. You do get one round. Actually, everybody in Ontario does get one round of IVF funding. And if you're a surrogate, you can use your funding for yourself and for somebody else as a surrogate. So that is actually kind of cool. That can be covered, but it only covers it once, and it doesn't cover medication, which we know is like $7,000 a cycle. So I mean, there are costs, but it is significantly less medically speaking. Just our costs of those medical things are less in Canada in general. The birth is covered by our health insurance. The baby is not covered if they're not a Canadian citizen, right? But I mean, there's extra insurance you can get for your infant and stuff. But
it's interesting. It has really put a thinking cap on me. I was a little in the dark on what I think, because we just read and listened, and when the gift card one was like, her and I were like, they get gift cards? Are you kidding?
That was the weirdest statement I had ever heard. I'm like, to go get food, like that's what like a gift card is. Like I'm so confused. So like, it was weird. I feel like thank you, because I feel so educated and so just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. What happens in Canada makes sense. Like it's not that I'm not saying that it's fair. I think that I agree with everything that you're saying, that like there are a lot of things that should be changed, that could be changed to benefit everybody, but it makes more sense than all the misconceptions that are out there, because it's
look what wild since you've gotten involved, Ariel. Like, I know this is a process for you, but you went to school, you became a therapist, like you saw a need, you're like, I'm doing it. So that has changed. People now have a resource to be able to go and get assistance with this. I think it's going to be a slow change, not the one you're making, but just to maybe the laws and the guidelines. It's going to come though. It has to come. There's too much going on. It's going to come. It's just going to take a while.
Well, and I think like we make progress when we talk about it and when we advocate for it and when we push to have these changes, right? Like, I mean, the reality is the people benefiting from the lack of guidelines, right, are maybe not the people we want making decisions about surrogacy in Canada, right?
I mean, the fact that New York has gotten their surrogacy bill of rights, and they've got, like, that took a while, painstaking, but they got it. They got so it's coming. It's possible, and it's it's something that can be done. And I think it's just like advocating for what is safe and ways to do this properly, and not making the standard the way that we get around rules, right? Which I think historically is the way that Canada's kind of seen, right? And this is another thing too, like, independent surrogacy is seen as like this way to go under the table, right? That's sometimes that's a misconception that, oh, I didn't get approved at an agency, so I'm going to go independent.
But that's not how that works in Canada, because independent surrogacy is how a lot of people are actually matching, because we don't have to deal with like realistically, the process in Canada is not hard. It's you find a surrogate, they go for medical screening, they pass medical screening, you do your contract, and you do your embryo transfer.
Wow.
Like it does not have to be complicated. It's just having an understanding of the laws, the paperwork. Here's the resources you need. Here's this information. And it does not have to be difficult. And independent surrogacy is not a way to get around the rules. All that means is you're matching on your own. You're having autonomy over your surrogacy journey. You're deciding who you want to carry for you or who you want to carry for. And you're matching, you're coming together on this, right? And there are aspects of surrogacy that are like, we can say what we want, but there are aspects of surrogacy that are transactional, whether we like it or not. You're bound by a contract, but you're matching based on the human experience and based on, you know, this mutually beneficial thing to help this couple have a baby. And that's not to say you have to be best friends forever and that you have to be over there every day for Sunday brunch. Like there are plenty of surrogates who are fine with pictures on the birthday and a Christmas card, and that's fine. That relationship can look like whatever you want, but match with people that want to do that type of arrangement with you, right? And I think sometimes it's a lot easier to find that for yourself than to rely on sometimes outside services that may or may not actually be helping in the way that you think they're helping.
Yeah, agreed.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. It's a hit or miss when it comes to, I can speak when it comes to matching with agencies. I've had great experiences, and then I had an experience where there was no respect given to me as the surrogate, and that wouldn't have happened had I done it independently, because I would have had time to figure out who these people are.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's pros and cons to everything.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
To everything. Can I ask you a really quick personal question? I know it's late where you are, and we'll let you go. But you had something done after this last birth. Can you explain what that was and a little bit as to like why?
Are you talking about my tubes?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had my fallopian tubes removed in my C-section. And I knew I wanted to do this regardless. Even though I was planning a VBAC, I talked to my midwife about it. I said, if I have to go for a C-section, like even if it's an emergency or I'm out or something, like I wanted her to know. But if I have to have a C-section, I want my tubes removed. And she was like, yeah, no problem. That's great. Because you can make that decision pretty easily in Canada here for that. I don't think that's as easy in the States to say, hi, I'd like permanent birth control, and them just to be okay.
No. There's all kinds of signatures.
Yeah. So I had my tubes removed. And the reason that I did this is because I'm done having children. I was done having children when I started surrogacy. My partner has a vasectomy. We are not having any more children at all. So not only is this a very permanent form of birth control and prevents any accidents that we do not want to have, but also because of the fertility treatments I've done, because of all of the IVF cycles and stuff, we don't exactly know what the risks are like for reproductive cancer. And we've seen some evidence that there are increased risks and risk factors. And I didn't want to take any chances, to be perfectly honest. And Marissa had cervical cancer, and, you know, reproductive cancer is kind of a silent killer. Ovarian cancer is called a silent killer because most women don't know that they are going to die from it until they are close to dying from it. Correct. And that scares the shit out of me, to be perfectly honest.
Absolutely.
So, I kind of did a lot of research, and, you know, ovarian cancer starts in your tubes and migrates, right? So by removing your tubes, you effectively remove your risk of ovarian cancer without having to remove your ovaries. By the way, I still have my ovaries. They are intact.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about like going into menopause or having no period, because all of that's regulated by the hormones that my ovaries produce. I just removed the highway. So, and I got to see them after I held them up after my C-section. I have a video of me like holding
I did see that. You know what? That right there opens up a whole nother discussion, especially for women who are doing multiple surrogacies, because I think in about 5 to 10 years, that's going to be kind of the standard. They're going to have them removed. Yeah, which I would be just a complete advocate for. because you're right. It's the highway.
Yeah.
And why not take that out of the equation? You can still be a mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for me too, like I don't have to worry about like birth control necessarily, right? But even as like an effective birth control option, we also know that birth control pills and IUDs and other forms of birth control are not great for women in a lot of respect, right? So it's like, when we're looking at really permanent birth control options as well, like this is a really viable option for people that know that they don't want to have children right now, because the reality is that with your ovaries and your uterus, you can still carry a pregnancy. You can still use your eggs, but you're not having a pregnancy at a time that you don't want to have a pregnancy. And I think, especially as things in the States change with reproductive rights, I think we're going to see a lot more of these permanent birth control methods, which I think is going to lead to an increase to IVF and planned pregnancies in this way.
Yeah. Agreed.
Because of the strict reproductive laws, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we better have some better laws and legislation around access to infertility care, or we're going to have a problem.
You tell them, Ariel.
Were your tubes tied, Ariel?
No.
Were they tied? They were never tied. You just had them removed.
Never tied, just fully removed.
Okay.
And you know what? It's funny. I thought I would feel a little weird about it. I thought I would feel like this sense of, I wasn't sure. I thought like, will I feel the sense of loss? Like I have effectively removed my ability to ever achieve a spontaneous pregnancy, which I've only had one because I had my daughter, right? And so I thought that might feel kind of weird, but honestly, I felt like really at peace with it. I felt like I could make a choice for my body as a woman that was respected and was permanent, and nobody questioned me, and that felt really good.
And kind of freeing a little bit.
Tell me about it. Goodbye, tubes.
Look at you. Wow. That's amazing. Woo. I think we could talk for hours and hours and hours.
We need a part 2.
We should do like part 2 when you like want to come back, and then we can really get into like journeys and stuff.
I do want to say I personally thank you, because I have learned so much from you, and the amount of information that you do research on your own to then share with everybody else, like it is beyond educational. You're helping so many people. You're helping not only surrogates, but you're helping intended moms, which is like such a hard thing to do. And as you said earlier, like I didn't even register that, like, oh my gosh, she really had to think about things that she was going to post because she didn't want to offend anybody. And that stress alone of being like, I want to be authentic, but I want to be careful to everybody's feelings. Bless your heart, because like that is so much on you to want to still tell the truth, but be so respectful to everybody.
Oh yeah, that's the hardest part, I think.
I bet. Yeah.
So hard. So thank you, because you do it gracefully. You do it amazingly. You were clearly born to do this. You are now in this industry forever. So like,
awesome.
I'm excited to just keep following you on your journey, because I know that you carrying babies is done, but your journey in surrogacy is not over.
Oh yeah. And I think that's what feels like. Oh my gosh, I got a frog in my throat. It's because I'm getting over COVID. I feel like it's so funny because, like you said, it's like this was my last surrogacy. I spent 8 years of my life dedicated to this, like dedicated to helping other people become parents. And now it's like I still get to do that, but I get to do it in this different way, and I get to watch it from a little bit of a further distance. But I think it would mean so much to me if like the work that I'm doing and all the effort I'm putting in, like I have spent so much time researching surrogacy. I mean, really, my entire degree was research, and surrogacy outcomes and donor conception and, all of that. And I think like being able to put all of that into something tangible and into, this educational program that I'm developing, right? Because there's nowhere in Canada that you can just go to one place and get all the information that you need. That doesn't even exist. And if you're researching, first of all, so if you go to the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, you're getting information from 2016. So that's not helpful. And if you go to the laws, good luck, because you have to navigate everything. And the information you need actually isn't even in the legislation. It's in the guidance documents, which aren't even part of that. So good luck finding those.
What a headache.
And then good luck finding the surrogacy requirements because every agency is different.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, like people need one place to go to, one course and learn everything that they need to know to do this process well and be successful at surrogacy. Because it's not just about matching. It's not just about getting people pregnant. It's about making sure that this is a positive experience for everybody.
Absolutely.
I applaud you. I keep going. I can't wait. I can't wait. Can anybody look at that once you get the course, or is this something that's a fee? I'm just curious.
It's still being a little bit developed now. We're hoping to have the whole program out in October. So we're not exactly sure how everything will look. It will be a program that intended parents can purchase. The idea is that they, you know, they can access this course. They will have a built-in community. They will have forums and education and handouts and all of these things, basically to allow them the autonomy to do this process all on their own, the way that it was designed. You don't have to pay a $20,000 agency fee. And you can do this on your own with all of this support and all of this help and, you know, access to quality counseling and therapy from licensed professionals, right? And, you know, all of these resources for people to have it. The idea is to make surrogacy accessible and affordable and, you know, paying into a program that'll teach you everything and it's not going to cost $20,000, right? It's going to be a game changer for a lot of people doing surrogacy in Canada.
Yeah, it is going to be a game changer. You're going to have to try and do one for the states next. So
that's my goal. But holy crap, every state has different legislation.
Oh, I know.
Why it is wild. Wild.
They call Canada the Wild West of surrogacy. The states is like a whole nother ball game, right? Because think in Canada, we don't have to worry about insurance. We don't have to worry about the compensation aspect, right? Which takes away some of the other legal factors that come with that, right? You know, we don't have to worry about a lot of things that they do in the States. And we're also much smaller. Like, even though, like, I mean, we're a big country land-wise, but like there's less people in Canada than there is in California, I think. So we're not a big population, right? So, I mean, I think like when we're looking at the differences, I mean, of course, things are going to be so much more, you know, different in the States and variable, whereas Canada, it's just kind of all across Canada, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
One day we can hope for it.
I know.
I'm just, you keep going. You have the energy of a bunny. I don't know. You're phenomenal.
It comes and goes, the energy, really.
Well, it's okay. I'm so sorry. We took so much of your time.
I know we did.
Oh my gosh, that's fine.
Damn.
I could talk about surrogacy forever. This is the problem, maybe, right?
So could we.
So God, this is like one of my favorites. Like, honestly, learned so much. I felt like you were hosting us. Like,
I know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And like, I mean, this is the first like real like interview that I've kind of done and talked about surrogacy. We were on Good Morning America actually recently. We were on a couple of our news stations. And so we've gotten some like that, but to be able to kind of talk about surrogacy and the things that are so important to me and like the ways that we can make this so much better and accessible for people. It's like, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to just have a platform to be able to do that, you know?
Well, thank you.
Anytime. Yeah. We hope to stick around and share as much information as we can, because this is the way that we're trying to get information out to people.
Our little part, our little slice. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the right people see the right stuff, right? And
correct.
Those are the people that matter, right?
Correct. Agreed.
Well, Ariel, if anybody wants to follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Carried with Love, so carried.with.love. And then my website is almost updated, so they can go to carriedwithlove.com, and a new website is coming very soon. It's going to have all the new services. It will have all the information about the new education program that will be available very, very soon. If people are interested in that, they can always email me directly at hello@carriedwithlove.com. And if people are interested in counseling or having kind of that therapeutic support, they can kind of reach out that way as well, or directly through the website.
Aww. You're just an angel. Angel on earth.
Well, thank you.
Speed, girl. Speed. You go. Wish all the best for you. Really.
Thank you.
Really. It's awesome.
It was wonderful speaking with you. Thank you.
Oh, so you too.
Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Oh, delightful.
Did I learn a lot? Hello. Open the brain. Get inside.
I just wanted to keep listening to her like talking. Like I just wanted to know more and more and more.
And I'm fascinated and just like a little like sad that I didn't go back to school and do something like that. Like she saw the need. She went back to school, got her therapist license, and now is like in this. And like she said, within 2 weeks, she was waitlisted. Like she couldn't take any more clients. So that need is so great. And can you imagine what it's like in the States? I know we have some of those because I do have a friend who's
but
close to one, but specifically for surrogacy and reproductive stuff like that, it's phenomenal.
And to be run by somebody who has experienced who cares, who's experienced it from a surrogate side, as like
both
multiple times.
Egg donation and surrogacy, C-sections, VBACs, vaginal. Like I'm like,
she's got it all. She's done
all of it. And she's the sweetest human being.
Yeah, she's really.
You're the sweetest human being.
You're very sweet. You're very sweet, Ariel. Okay. So then we're gonna wrap it up. But thank you so much, Ariel. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
If you guys have any questions or would like to share your story, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Stop.Sit.Surrogate.
Been another edition of Stop.Sit.Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.